And good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for taking the time to attend this webinar. Today, we're going to discuss AP automation and the value of effective supplier engagement. My name is Rowan Lemley, and I will be the host for today's webinar. When I'm not hosting webinars, I am the Director of Product Marketing here at Tradeshift. Joining me today are Rizwan Malik, our Global Lead for Value Engineering, and Michael Creedon, our Manager for Solution Consulting in North America. We are also joined by Tobias Kundmüller, who is the Global E-Invoicing Project Lead at Schaeffler. So welcome and thank all of you for joining today and leading this discussion. The agenda for today will cover the state of accounts payable. We will delve into why digital transformation projects struggle, sometimes even fail. Then we will discuss seller engagement as a foundation for success. And of course, we'll speak with Tobias and we'll learn all about Schaeffler and their journey towards digital transformation. I'm going to hand over to Michael Creedon. Take it away, Mike.
Great. Thank you, Rowan. Pleasure to be with everybody who's attending the webinar today, as well as our distinguished panelists. For those that are in attendance, this statement on our screen may seem a little jarring. I mean, 85% of global trade today remains digitally disconnected. And this may seem like a bit of a shock, right? Given that companies and analysts and technology providers and solutions in the enterprise AP space have been predicting things like the end of paper and massive reduction in manual AP processes for more than a decade or two or even three, if we talk about e-invoicing and OCR being around for multiple decades. And when we talk about digital connection, we're not talking about email, right? That doesn't count here. And organizations clearly, whether they're buyers or suppliers, may exchange business documents electronically in some form, right? But they're not really connected across any kind of business network. And the reality is that optimal transformation across this enterprise AP space hasn't exactly quite happened the way we all thought it would yet. So why does Tradeshift believe that's the case? Well, the reality is that companies are still not using their data as well as their supplier data, technology applications and platforms that are available to them, and their own human capital very strategically. Right? Despite years of advancements in technology across source to pay or procure to pay or invoice to pay spaces, companies just aren't using the data that they have at their fingertips, technology platforms to enable them to use that data, as well as their human capital to address challenges that still exist within back office operations and accounts payable. And the majority of the work that AP teams are doing tends to be more reactionary, right? When companies are dealing with, transactional fire drills and bottlenecks, things like invoice exceptions, non-compliant invoices, missing invoices, delayed payments, right? AP teams typically handle that reactively, right? Rather than trying to address them proactively in a more strategic way. Tradeshift is not the only organization that believes this is true, right? If you look at McKinsey from 2020, a report that they had put out, indicates 66% of digital transformation projects fail to hit their stated objectives. When we say stated objectives in AP, what are we referring to? Right, we're referring to a reduction of paper-based invoice volume, a reduction in invoice cycle times, perhaps a decrease in DPO, a decrease in the rate of exceptions, and certainly a decrease in the rate of non-compliant invoice receipt. And Forbes, in a similar year, doubles down on this and suggests that 70% of supply chain projects fail because of poor supplier and user adoption. And what's interesting about this is that it's not just poor adoption from the buying enterprise, who is the investor, right, in this technology, but it's also because suppliers either aren't getting the value out of this transformation activity, right, or don't have a good experience collaborating with their customer across this technology platform. When we think about supply chain projects, the value that's typically driving them is hyper-focused with the enterprise buyer, right, the entity that's investing in the technology, how that technology can drive better workflow, can improve their own best practices, and general AP efficiencies. But too often, these projects leave behind the supplier in terms of what's in it for them, right? And what value will the suppliers derive from this digital transformation initiative that their customers are putting forth. So we at Tradeshift are constantly talking internally, as well as with our partners and our prospects, and asking the really important question: why is the supplier always the forgotten part of the equation in digital transformation projects within AP? And the reality is that as suppliers remain disconnected, this disconnection is really drowning AP teams, right? Whether we're talking about a drastic number of supplier inquiries that typically come into enterprise AP teams due to lack of digital communication methods, digital collaboration capabilities, and an overall lack of centralized communication to determine where the status of an invoice, a credit note, a payment, a purchase order is in the workflow. What else is a headache? Well, AP still has to deal with supplier data requirements, updates, which continually strain teams that are already swamped with things like invoice exceptions, payment inquiries, non-compliant invoices, OCR errors, those types of things. And then last but certainly not least, accounts payable is still tasked with manually trying to resolve broken or inefficient channels. Again, very little centralized digital collaboration capabilities around invoicing transactions, very little transparency and visibility that provides value to both buyers and suppliers, which just makes this whole ecosystem and these transactions just harder and harder to resolve effectively, also while giving value to both buyers and suppliers. So I'm going to hand the conversation back to Rowan now, who will introduce Rizwan Malik, who will actually get into some highlights of Ardent Partners, some of Ardent Partners' analyst report from 2023 that again goes into some of the data to support how important it is to engage suppliers in a digital transformation project. So Rowan, back over to you.
Thanks, Michael. I've always found that statistic around why or how many organizations fail in their digital transformation to be quite jarring. And I think you raised or you framed the conversation quite well in highlighting how suppliers are often an afterthought. And it's always kind of struck me that the nature of buyer-centric sort of digital transformation is kind of like legacy thinking. And I know that's not the way we approach it here at Tradeshift. But I don't want to take any time away from Riz. So Riz, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you, Rowan and Michael. Yes, those are very bold claims. 85% companies still disconnected. Well, what I wanted to take you folks through is what are the analysts saying? So here's a study by Ardent Partners that was done this year. And what you're seeing on the screen is in the blue or the purple, what technologies those organizations are currently using. So now Ardent Partners did this with over 200 companies to see where are they, what technology are they using, and what do they plan on using, and if they plan on using that same technology in the next 24 months. So as you can see from the top, a lot of companies, and this kind of goes back to Michael's point, a lot of companies are still disconnected, and their digital journey and their digital transformation is really kind of stagnant at the moment. If you look at the top of the list, document imaging, OCR, and workflow seem to be what they are currently using. And that really has not changed for many decades. And as you can see, what they plan on using, they're going to decrease that. They see that there is a need for digital transformation, but they're currently still stuck in the manual process or the document imaging or OCR PDFs, right? But what I'd like to highlight here, and what I've highlighted in green, is electronic invoicing. 57% of the companies are currently using that, but 31% plan on using that going forward, right? Same thing with business or payment networks, as well as the supplier portal. So it kind of goes back to and supports the theory of, hey, do companies, are they still disconnected? Do they plan on going through that digital transformation? And I thought it was pretty interesting that supplier self-service or service portal is highly valued, and they are moving towards that, and they see that that's the way of the future. However, a lot of companies are still using imaging and document scanning. We also believe at Tradeshift that a network, just like a LinkedIn, right, is very powerful. And we think that's undervalued. With, Tradeshift has over 2 million connected partners, customers, buyers, suppliers. We think that payment network and a network in general is the way of the future. We see that with a lot of different technologies, a lot of different platforms. We all use them every day. So it was kind of interesting that the claims of disconnected companies is still there, and that's highlighted by the first 3 items on this list. Another study that prioritized, again, by Ardent Partners, what is the agenda? What is the success factors for a lot of companies? So what do they value going forward in 2023? And as you can see from the top of the list, reporting and analytics seems to be at top of mind for a lot of organizations. And then come in close second is AP automation. So like an e-invoicing or a procure-to-pay solution is what they're looking to do for 2023. And again, reducing and eliminating paper and those manual tasks, as was highlighted by Michael earlier, is still top of mind. But it was kind of interesting that, at the bottom of the list was they want suppliers to submit invoices electronically. Now, it's kind of interesting that that's at the bottom of the list, and it should be really, we think, at the top of the list, because you really need to establish a foundation, right? If you don't have a platform to submit electronic invoices, how are you going to get the other benefits? How are you going to reduce those manual tasks? How are you going to implement an AP automation system or get those analytics that are so key to making decisions? And again, being proactive rather than reactive. So we think the tables or this list should really be inverted, where you establish a platform, you eliminate those paper and those manual tasks, you have an automated solution, and therefore now you can see all the areas where you can benefit from through the data analytics as well as the reporting. So we think the script here should be a little bit flipped in reverse. Now, what's the potential impact? Now, if I just focus in on supplier onboarding and the network, not sure if anyone's aware of this, but AP staff, they spent 22+% of their time on handling phone calls, emails, and that's really because they don't have a supplier self-service or a portal or a platform where they can engage with the supplier and the buyer, and they can be on the same page saying, hey, what is the status of my invoice? When will I be paid? Are there any invoices that are due in the next 30 days or 60 days, right? That's more of a proactive approach. And what ends up happening, and I hear that from so many companies, that we have a team that just handles these types of inquiries from our suppliers. So again, the supplier is being forgotten here. And, we need to provide them the tools and the visibility that they need to make rapid decisions and plan for, especially since COVID, plan for their cash flows, right? So we think having a supplier portal will benefit you in that one area. Also, managing their information. How many times do you folks get calls saying, hey, you know what, my email address has changed, or my telephone or contact information, my company profile information? How can we do that? So a portal, a self-service portal, will facilitate that and have the suppliers, empower the suppliers to perform those activities on their own. And that, we think, can easily reduce 50+% of those manual tasks that organizations do. And it's also from Hackett, as well as Ardent, as well as Tradeshift, if companies, best-in-class companies, utilize a portal or self-service platform, they're more likely to use it. So if I have something, I'm more likely to use it. And it also requires, champions and folks saying, hey, you know what, we're mandating and we're going to utilize this technology. So just from a network, supplier engagement, those are just 3 main benefits from just having a supplier portal. Now let's move on to e-invoicing, right? So AP automation, what are the benefits for having technology in place? So if you go through that digital transformation, that digital process, and you infuse AI into this, you can easily, best-in-class organizations are processing invoices 3 times faster. If you have the ability to do auto coding with AI, right? Again, promoting those efficiencies and productivity through AP automation, through AI, and freeing up that time for your staff to do other things, right? Strategic things. There's the mundane manual processing that we're all used to, but how about if we streamline that and have reduction in invoices, right? Straight through processing. So if you put certain rules in place and you allow clean invoices to come in through your AP department, you can process those invoices 3 times faster. So you're 26% of invoices or companies process invoices straight through. That is very low. That means 75% of companies face invoice exceptions, right? So when I say invoice exceptions, we're talking about things such as, hey, the price doesn't match. There's no goods receipt, right? There's price discrepancies and other things, right? So invoice exceptions seems to kind of just slow the entire process down. Now, in addition to that, when you carry that process even further, you can also reduce your late payments, right? So those are just a few things just in the AP area. Now, AP is the downstream effect, right? Where does all of this process start? This really starts with your purchase requisitions and POs. So we think there's also definitely benefits for having a P2P platform that allows you to affect your upstream, right? So your procurement, your requisitioning. So if you have spend compliance, right? Aligning your policies, your contracts, reducing your maverick spend, at least by 20%. Increase your productivity by 25% by promoting those efficiencies, those workflows that were mentioned in the earlier study. Collaboration, right? It's a matter of communication and collaboration. So if you increase that, then there will be less chance of errors, and you promote those efficiencies. In addition, catalog management. So if you allow your suppliers, and empower your suppliers to update content, update the contracts, update the images, right? That can increase the ability for products to get out there. That promotes more buying, right? And it also helps the suppliers because it increases their digital wallet. So those are just some of the few things I want to highlight. And it's not just about AP, it also affects the procurement process as well. Now, what does this all mean at the end of the day? And I like to use something called the power of one. What does that mean in savings for your organization? So if you're looking at your P&L, your balance sheet, your income statements, right? This is an example of a company that has about $1 billion in revenue. And if you just improve COGS by 1%, your cost of goods sold, and your SG&A, right? That's where the AP department really falls under. Reducing it by 1%, $6.7 million in savings for a company with about $1 billion in revenue. And SG&A, so about $1 million in savings. So that's a very, very conservative estimate that I have used and that I've calculated for organizations that size. And in addition to that, so if you look at the overarching P&L improvements, so if you add a payment methods, or if you add supply chain financing, right? What kind of working capital that could be released by if you extend your payment terms? Almost $2 million in working capital release. And we all know that cash flow to this day is so key to every organization. So here are just some food for thought here. We think, we can help a lot of companies, but what I'd really love to hear is going into an actual case study. We have Tobias on the call here. I think the best way to get these results is to really understand the journey of Schaeffler, right? They've been a customer with us for several years, And I think it's better to hear it from one of our customers, our valued customers. So Rowan, back to you, and let's talk about Schaeffler.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Riz. Those numbers you just talked us through, I mean, they just emphasize, for me at least, both the need that organizations have, but also the opportunity that organizations have, as they digitally transform. And I'm often amazed by just how significant the small little e-invoice is in digital transformation and the impact that supplier engagement and e-invoicing has on all those KPIs that you just described. Maybe not so much the cost of goods sold, but still, it's a massive, massive value driver for pretty much a majority of the KPIs that at least accounts payable track. So vitally important to basically get supplier engagement right and to get the mass of your invoices electronically. And that is the perfect segue to our next speaker and somebody who is directly connected to a real world example of e-invoicing and supplier engagement. Welcome, Tobias.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's really a pleasure.
Fantastic. Well, maybe you could just introduce yourself first, Tobias, to the audience, for those who don't know you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Yeah, my name is Tobias Kundmüller, now working for 3 years within Schaeffler in various positions in accounts payable and also in automation. Now I'm mainly responsible for our global e-invoicing project. And yeah, I'm really happy to give you now some information about our success story with our partner Tradeshift.
Fantastic. Well, thank you once again. Maybe we just start off by talking a little bit about the background, what motivated Schaeffler to start digital transformation, and just set the scene for us, if you would.
Of course. Yeah, so basically I have to point out that Schaeffler sees itself as a technology company in the automotive industry. We are really convinced that technology will help our suppliers, but also our customers to create value and real benefits. Yeah, within the digital transformation, and especially the climate change is one of our hot topic in our organization. Therefore, we want to be really, really curious for new technologies, like, for example, invoicing. And now, yeah, talking about our success story with invoicing. So we started in 2017 with various key challenges which we have faced. Mostly all invoices were received as paper dispatch. And of course, as said, that's really, really bad for our company's footprint related to climate change. The second key challenge was that the PDFs we have received have been sent as an unstructured and in a really scanned format. So our implemented technique was not able to read the data consistently and with 100% recognition. And the third really hard topic we faced at this time was the decentralized invoice channel. Then we had to look into the future. How should Schaeffler work with it? And we had a vision. Yeah, we wanted to receive standardized formats because we see it as a main benefit for 100% recognition. And therefore, we implemented EDI connections with our suppliers via Tradeshift, and it was a really key success factor for our finance department. Furthermore, we went live in the beginning of 2018 with our European branches, and it was a really, really great success. And therefore, we rolled out our solution in the second quarter 2018 in the region China. Furthermore, end of 2019, we were also able to roll our invoicing solution with Tradeshift out into the region North Americas with various Schaeffler regions in Canada, in the United States.
Wow, you raised so many good points there. I feel like we need multiple webinars to cover them all. I mean, the sort of the impetus around centralization and standardization, that's classic in terms of why companies have been digitally transforming for years and years. And I think it's really great to hear that Schaeffler takes its role as a good corporate citizen so seriously. And though I think companies like ours, Tradeshift, have been talking about the global impact of e-invoicing for years and years and years. It's really more important when companies like yours take it seriously, and of course you have. On the topic of Schaeffler, maybe you can tell us some of the key challenges that you experienced as you digitally transformed over the few years, and how you overcame them.
Of course, yeah. Well, so definitely hot topic within our project is supplier engagement. How we can motivate our suppliers to send invoices through Tradeshift. Yeah. By providing them information and also the benefits, yeah, that technology and especially digitalization in the invoice receipt process is not that complex and can be easily adopted from their end. Yeah. And therefore, we wanted to point out the highlights and also the real benefits for them. For example, our big suppliers are enabled to send us via EDI interfaces, electronic invoices via Tradeshift. It's safer than sending invoices via post through the global Schaeffler world. And especially Tradeshift shows them also a better transparency about the invoice process with Schaeffler, and create a lot of reportings, and also will give them a lot of insights about the invoice process with Schaeffler. Especially, yeah, the strong exchange internally within our purchasing department, but also with the logistics function, is one of the key benefits for getting in contact with our suppliers to overcome the key challenges, but also to get in contact with them and to provide necessary insights on the main benefits of such an digitalization project.
So really, it's all about creating visibility and showing the suppliers that there is value to digitally transform themselves. I think that's, within Schaeffler's global supply chain, obviously you guys are leading that conversation, but you must be doing it well, because of course your rate of success is so high. Maybe you can expand on the strategy and the process for supplier engagement that sort of helped you achieve so much success.
Of course. So generally, we have here supplier segmentation. We are differentiating between big volume suppliers, so-called integration projects with high invoice volume, and they are using EDI interfaces to send us invoices automatically. And on the other hand, by receiving special reports about what is the current status of my invoice. For self-service suppliers, lower invoice volume, especially small suppliers, they're using Tradeshift special web UI platform. Yeah. So by getting in contact with them, we have different outreach programs, and also the channels and methods are really different. For integrations, for example, we are getting proactively in contact with our suppliers by using purchasing and also our logistic function to present really in detail the main benefits in Zoom calls, in presentations about the next steps, and what is really necessary to be a customer and a supplier with Tradeshift. And with Tradeshift in the network, but also within the organization with Schaeffler. Yeah. And here we have also technical engineering leads from Tradeshift's perspective for all technical questions. For self-service suppliers, we are getting in contact with them for driving onboarding ways, getting in contact with them by driving these ways based on country. We have here also great support from Tradeshift's perspective, driving such supplier webinars to go through the platform to show what are the main benefits, how to send an invoice through Tradeshift. And to be honest, the lessons learned during the project, it's really important to have some native speakers for each country with Tradeshift, but also within Schaeffler, to get in contact with them, to create the value, to show how to send an invoice. And that makes us strong and also successful within this project.
Yeah, I think over the years, as I've had conversations with people like yourself, Tobias, on this topic, we've discussed things like supplier segmentation, and we've discussed different channels for outreach, whether it's a phone call or an email or an educational webinar. But and you raised up a really interesting point there about the need for sort of local language and sort of within that within the process. But I think the one thing that you can't substitute and you can't imagine is that leadership has to come from the organization, from Schaeffler, from yourself. I think, having, for example, an executive sponsor in-house that like a champion, I think that goes a long way. And I also think, and you'll probably agree, that you can't really imagine that you do this project for supplier engagement and then it's just over. It's kind of like an always on process, because there's always supplier churn. You bring in new suppliers, you have to engage them, you have to onboard them. So I think, just keeping it in mind that it's not just a one and done project, but it's a constant state of engagement.
Definitely.
Well, go on.
We're seeing this project definitely not as a project, it's an ongoing process, to get in contact with suppliers. Really, really important for our corporation. I think the key results are phenomenal.
Yeah, they are. Incidentally, there is somewhere on our website, if anybody in the audience wants to read more specifically about Schaeffler, there is a customer success story published on the website. I don't have the link right now, but it may be that it gets posted a little bit later. So Tobias, what is, we just talked about success. What does success look like for Schaeffler?
Yeah, I think generally success should be reflected from various perspective. We have this qualitative perspective, which is reflecting also the cooperation with our supplier, to establish a better transparency and also higher security for transferring their electronic invoices. And of course, we have with Tradeshift a harmonized tool for our invoice processes. We have one tool for our suppliers to make it not complicated at all. But on the other hand, of course, if we see internally for our AP colleagues, they can really focus now on a qualitative perspective on their key task for handling exceptions, focus on more automation instead of scanning these paper invoices the whole day. So I think it's also a value proposition we are providing to our accountants and also to our employees within Schaeffler. But of course, if we are discussing about KPIs, I see KPI generally as keep people inspired. We have, of course, a quantitative perspective as well to reduce the paper dispatch to less than 6% during the years of all invoices. And of course, this is really, really connected to a higher auto posting rate and payments in time, and which is also reflecting again to our qualitative perspective with supplier engagement and also the happiness of our suppliers in general.
That's really interesting. We often say, in our industry, things like automation frees up AP managers for more, value adding tasks. And it's not, of course, you just spoke to that, but it's not just that. It's the link between e-invoicing and basically high quality data that Michael was talking about earlier on, which allows better reporting, better analytics, and then better decision making, right? And so when we say more value adding tasks, it's more value adding because they have the data, they have the analysis, and they can actually do more, better informed decision making and all that. So really, really interesting. So what do you think, Tobias, you would say were the main lessons learned in this process, and how do you see the future? What's in store for Schaeffler going forward?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So what we can definitely say, it was definitely a good decision in 2017 to invest into the cooperation with Tradeshift. We have here since 2017 responsive partner, especially in critical times like during the pandemic. I think also that the rollouts were driven successfully together with Tradeshift, and every region, like region North Americas, has its own benefits by using the Tradeshift platform. Looking into the future, we're driving more improvement projects together with Tradeshift to create more value to our supplier, but also to make simply life easier for them. And we want to roll out our global e-invoicing initiative with Tradeshift together, not only in Europe, but also globally in the Schaeffler world, for example, like India and so on. Of course, so generally, we have ambitious goal. We would like to drive the future of e-invoicing within Schaeffler to provide really, really reasonable value for our partners.
That sounds great. You know, Tradeshift has a vision to a fairly, I would say, you know, grandiose might be a word to describe it. We have a vision to connect every company in the world, and of course we couldn't do it without partners like Schaeffler and yourself. That was super interesting. Thank you so much, Tobias. And I want to hand it back to Michael, I believe, to you know, tie it all together if you could, Michael.
Sure, happy to, Rowan. And again, thank you to Tobias for sharing, you know, sharing nuggets of his experience with Schaeffler, what worked really well, you know, their own lessons learned. And I think tying that into, in general, what Tradeshift believes should be lessons learned from digital transformation initiatives are really threefold. You know, the first is that, you know, downstream processes like, you know, improving AP workflow, improving automation will continue to lag until the priority is getting suppliers engaged and getting them to submit digital invoices in a more optimal way, right? Until suppliers are sending, to Tobias's point earlier, structured data versus unstructured data, you know, automating those downstream processes will likely continue to be a bit of a struggle for the enterprise. The second is really prioritizing the digitization efforts for the suppliers and increasing their value in order to improve historically stagnant metrics like straight-through processing and supplier inquiries, right? In order to drive heightened levels of e-invoicing, in order to drive perhaps faster payment, in order to drive straight-through processing rates, that data coming in has to be digital. It has to be compliant. It can't be missing, you know, key pieces of data, you know, because, for example, OCR failed to capture all of the relevant information, right? Our goal is to get suppliers digital, to receive their invoices in a compliant fashion in order to speed up that those straight-through processing efforts, and hopefully on the back end, decrease the time that it's taking suppliers to evaluate issues with their invoices or get updates on the status of their invoices. And then the last one, this is all tied together, is, you know, what I like to say is, you know, if you put a garbage in, you get garbage out, right? So improving invoice data coming into AP. To Tobias's point earlier, you know, they started their project with a lot of unstructured data, where the PDFs they had, you know, weren't able to get that recognition out of that volume kind of pre-Tradeshift to the extent that they wanted to. So if you put better data into your AP process through digital invoicing, compliant invoicing, the data getting fed to the downstream processes and to data analytics and reporting is going to be much, much more optimal. It's going to improve your invoice matching rates against your purchase orders and your goods receipts. It should lower your invoice exception percentage, make for better reporting, and obviously put the enterprise in a better position, you know, to potentially pay suppliers earlier, on time, and just in general provide better visibility and transparency to those important business partners. So before we wrap up, again, thank you everybody for your time. I'll hand it back to Rowan for any final remarks before closing up the webinar today.
Thanks, Michael. Really appreciate that summary. Really important. And Riz, Tobias, thank you both as well for joining us in this really interesting conversation today. As a final point of housekeeping, I just want to say to the audience, in addition to thanking you for your time, if you did write any questions into our chat and we didn't cover them, we will cover them after the fact. And I also want to say, watch this space. We are publishing a guide to e-invoicing and supplier engagement as well. So we'll probably manage to get you that link too. So thank you once again for your time today, and watch this space.